Okay, I want to talk to you very briefly about population ecology. This is chapter 36 in the non-majors book, and it's one of the chapters in the 50s in the majors book, 53 or 54 or 55, I'm not sure which one. But in either case, these are just some ideas that you want to know and understand. The first idea is population density, which is pretty self-explanatory, right? The number of individuals, which is the density per, number of individuals per area, which is density. And so an example is the number of oak trees per kilometer squared, or earthworms per meter squared in the forest soil. So this just gives you an idea of how many of that organism and how it might affect the environment depending on the density of the population. Dispersion pattern is another way of looking at individuals in or looking at populations within an environment. And there's three different kinds of patterns we talk about. There's the clumped pattern, which you can see these starfish are clumped together. Here would be an example of where the populations would be, or individuals in the population would be. And frequently that's going to be unequal resource distribution. So the resources will be concentrated in certain areas, and that will be why those individuals would clump there. So if you can look at the pattern of dispersion, you can kind of maybe tell some information about the environment. Here is a picture of a beach, and you can see the people are pretty much evenly spread out, and that's what uniform pattern dispersion is. Usually interacting with the other organisms, and so they have their own sort of little domains. And then random patterns like these flowers. There's really no clumping or equal spacing or anything like that. And that would be due to distributed nutrients and usually like a random way of the organisms getting to where they are, like seed dispersion. It's not going to be completely equal when the wind blows the seeds or something like that. We've taken a look at this in the majors class, the survivorship curves. I just wanted to remind you what that is. So if we look at the curves, you have your percentage of maximum lifespan on here. So basically 100% means max lifespan. 50% means half of the maximum lifespan. Percentage of survivors on a logarithmic scale. And so you can see 100%, 10, 1, 0.1. And so really the point of this is to show you there's three different types of curves. And if you see the curve, you can tell how the organism might reproduce. So in the top curve here, the type 1 curve, that's like humans, they are going to survive at a high number for a long time and then drop off slowly over time. So that means most of the young survive here. That typically is going to be the case in groups with parental care, and they probably don't make that many offspring. The opposite of that is the type 3. So this is an oyster. So oysters are a good example. Most of their young do not survive, but those that do will survive all the way out to the max lifespan. So type 3s are going to make lots and lots of offspring because most of them don't survive, but they don't have to put the energy into parental care. And then type 2 is going to be basically a straight line, like a squirrel or a ground squirrel, something like that. And this basically means the offspring die off over time in at a constant rate. We've also looked at this in the majors class, looking at population growth. So there's two models. The first model is in the blue here. This is the idealized situation. Basically, there's unlimited space, unlimited nutrients, unlimited all resources generally, and so we call that exponential growth. So in like bacteria, when they're first starting to grow, they exponentially grow, and so the curve would look like this, just shooting up really fast. And sorry, it must be on automatic. If there is no limitation of resources, it will continue to be exponential. Once resources become limited, it looks more like an S, kind of a spread out S, and that's a logistic growth model. So that means it booms and then slows down rate-wise, and then really the number of individuals stays about the same. Now that doesn't mean no one's dying. It just means the turnover of birth and death rate is equivalent. And that level that it levels out at, the number here, is going to be K, which is your carrying capacity. So the max amount of individuals the environment can support is going to be your flattened out part of the logistic curve. And that's where these terms come from. So I'll do K-selected first. So K-selected has to do with a population kind of at its limits. So it's going to be a real stable population, and to basically keep that, it's going to be organisms that produce few young, but most of those young survive, so a type 1 curve, and they have parental care frequently because that's going to help the organism survive. R selected is going to be kind of a boom and bust sort of situation, so they are going to have lots of reproduction, not a lot of parental care, so lots of offspring. Many don't survive, but since they have so many, then it ends up keeping the population up anyway. So that would be R. So K-selected would be most mammals are K-selected, like amphibians, and most fish are going to be R-selected. But really, most of the time, no one's straight K or R. It just depends on the species, and they're usually sort of in between. You guys know that human population is growing really rapidly. It is slowing down. Of course, the numbers keep going up, but the rate is slowing down. So you can see here would be the total population size, and this is the annual increase in millions of people. You see the number of increases predicted, and even what we know here to be true. The population increase is getting smaller, but the total population, of course, is still getting larger. And you'll notice there's two different scales. The annual increase is in millions, whereas the population is in billions. So over time, we should have less of a population increase, but our numbers are still growing. And the rate of increase is really dictated by how many births there are compared to how many deaths, right? Because deaths take out individuals from the population, while births add individual to the population. So you can see countries go through transitions, or whatever level you want to look at, populations go through transitions. So where the death rate, as it gets lower and the birth rate gets higher, that's going to be a really high rate of increase in the population. And you see over time that's dropping. So the death rate's getting lower, but the birth rate is as well. And so that's typically what happens in developed countries. And once you get to them being equal, then you'd have a steady state of number of people in that population. Of course, this also goes for other organisms as well, besides just humans. Yeah. The question becomes, if we have 7 billion people right about now, 8 billion in the next 20 years, 9.5 billion by the mid-21st century. The question is, do we have enough resources? Right now, at least with the way we can farm, it looks like, and do agriculture, it looks like we'll have to double the amount of food production. So that'll require some new technologies in order to make that happen. Or we start taking over more land and taking away other environments, which has consequences, of course. Those consequences can kind of be described by, or how much resources you consume can be described by the term ecological footprint. So sort of how much impact land-wise, or how much land is required to provide for that individual or nation. So land is required to get you food, fuel, water, your housing, both building the house and the place to actually have the house, waste disposal, also all your clothes, manufacturing, all that stuff, because that's going to be growing plants in order to make that, or refining fossil fuels in order to make the synthetics. And if you look at here, we can see our ecological footprint, right? Here's the US, obviously, massive amount compared to the rest of the world. You can see parts of Europe, and then Australia also contribute a lot. But the thing that this means is that our footprint is bigger than the amount of land that the US is. So that's kind of an issue for sustainability for a long period of time. And also the question is, like, once other countries, let's say India and China, which are really big and up and coming, once they get to be in these red colors, and they have a footprint that's as large as or larger than their country, where are they going to get the resources? So that's something we have to really think about in the future. And also, trying to decrease our footprint in the sense of being smart consumers and reusing and being, I think, conscious of the kind of products that we consume, how many of them, and what's kind of necessary, and what you might be able to cut out. And you can cut out a lot of things without really devaluing or decreasing the standard of living that we have. It's just sort of being smart about it. Okay, so these are some of the concepts you'd want to know, basically what I've just talked about. The next lecture will be over population, or community, or individuals. Oh, the next part here, I'm going to make a new one for that so that you don't have to watch 20 minutes in a row.